Welcome back to the whatever part this video is of this ongoing regs course that I'm delivering, giving you all the knowledge and stuff I have learned from teaching the regs for the past 2 years, which is not a lot. This video is called What's That All About Then? It's all about the regulations. We're going to go through the regulations and a bit of history about them. Can you skip this one? Probably. Will it knock you out the flow? Probably. Will I inevitably mention things in here that help you throughout the course? Probably. So skip it, you will. If you know all about the regs or you've done a regs before you're doing a reset, maybe you want to, but in for a penny, in for a pound, you may as well watch my face for another 15 minutes. You're going to watch all the other videos. Okay. Well, the clicker's not working, for fuck's sake. You'll have worked out by now I'm no John Ward. I like a bit of swearing. Alright then. Who is on this course and what do they want from me? Well, anyone could be on this course because I'm delivering it via a internet means. But generally, when I've been teaching it in a classroom environment, I get electricians who need it for JRB cards. Obviously, electricians come through because they want to re-qualify to the new regs anyway. So at the moment, I don't know if there's a massive glut of people going through trying to get the Amendment 3, but there is always people who are qualified to the last edition coming through. And that is a lot of us. I don't know how many electricians that is, but there's a lot of us. So the main people I get on the courses are electricians who need it for the JRB cards. They'll renew a JRB card. They've only got the 17th at the minute, and they'll want the 18th put on the card, so they do that. Other people that do it, a lot of people training to become electricians, and they want base knowledge of the books and how they work, which is what I aim to deliver on my course, is how to use the book. Keep emphasising this, not what the regs are. I will put a video at the end of these videos, and on my YouTube channel I maintain a playlist of excellent resources that I think are excellent. So if you go to the 18th edition playlist, you'll find them there. I've linked to all the John Ward videos where he goes through all the changes in the new book. I've linked to some other videos where people are discussing the new regulations to give you more of a feel for what's actually in the regs, but that's not what I'm trying to do here. So those resources will be available at the end, and I always keep my YouTube playlists updated with other people's videos that I think are good. And the other people that come on this are enthusiastic dabblers. I don't know why they come. Some people just do electrical things as a hobby, and they turn up. Fair play, do what you want. I could give a fuck, yeah? I like reading things on about trains, and trained people don't get upset, so why would I get upset if some random person who's interested in electrical wants to go on a course and learn about it? The other people I get that ain't on this list is people that get sent on these courses by companies because they think that somehow having an 18th edition qualification gives you some kind of competency level working with electrical stuff. So a firm I used to work for, who are not named because they're cunts, used to wouldn't let people go and change fuses or do resets in mechanical equipment panels because they said they weren't competent. Fine, I get that. And then they'd send them on an 18th edition course and suddenly let them do it when they got back, even though the 18th edition course is just a paperwork exercise. So be aware, and I think we'll go into it later, that this course does not give you any competency as a physical, hands-on electrical engineer. It just gives you competency on rules and regulations related to electrical things, so be aware of that. So, the 18th edition. It helps to know a little bit about previous editions. Now, I've got loads of them here, so this isn't my first edition, but this is the 16th edition Amendment 2, which is the one I used at college. I actually worked to the 16th edition Amendment 1, which I believe was green, which was the first regs book I ever bought, about a year before I got an apprenticeship, because I was just an enthusiastic dabbler. I wanted to be an electrician. I always wanted to be an electrician, randomly. I didn't always want to be a scumbag electrician, but that's how it's worked out. So here's my college one. It was BS 767 1992. This amendment came out in 1997, but I did like to have the book. So that's the one I used at college, and then I've gone through various books, so chuck that one down there. Next, I think, came along was the green one I had. Obviously, you can see I re-qualified for that because I've got all my tabs in there, which I've done a video on a bit about bad tabbing. Bad tabs. There's that one. There's a red one there. Never read a copy of the red edition. Had to buy it to retro. Had to buy this edition to retrospectively look at a job that was done to this edition when I was doing some snagging / consulting. Then I moved on to the... Oh, that's a 16th brown. Retro. That's Amendment 2, so that previously... I don't fucking know, that comes before the other one. And then obviously the one I cut my teeth on as a trainer is Big Blue. Yeah, not dark blue, light blue. Nice. So yeah, that's what I cut my teeth on. And now, I'm just starting to get my head around the brown one, which is nice. Some nice changes in here. We're moving on a lot. We're moving on a lot faster. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But the only thing about this red book is this shitty cover. IT. Stop skimping on the money. But let's not just talk about the regs books that I've got, that I've dealt with over my career. Let's go right back to the birthing of electrical installation. So, in 1881, right, before we start, I don't want people commenting this is wrong. This is just a rundown. This is not an historic artifact that I want dragging out for people to talk about in thousands of years. This is just a rundown to give you a feel from where the regs come from on this course. So, if it wasn't 1881, fuck off. So, allegedly, in 1881, the first public street electricity supply in the world was turned on in Surrey. Gas street lights, which were popular before then, were replaced by electric street lamps supplied by the German company Siemens. The lighting was dim and of poor quality, mostly due to the inadequacy of the cabling used. You imagine it's new, they don't really know what they're doing, it's the first set of street lights, so there's got to be problems. As soon as the system became active, the technical press, which obviously existed around that time, still, jumped on it and reported issues associated with the Rhine, proving that the press were cunts in 1881 and they're still cunts now. There are reports of children and drunks harming themselves on the exposed wires. There's still reports of children and drunks harming themselves on exposed wires to this day, so nothing's changed there regarding children and drunks. The following year, the first edition of the wiring regulations was published by the Society of Telegraph Engineers and Electricians. Now, on a course, I would say, why did it get published by the Society of Telegraph Engineers and Electricians? Well, it's an interesting point that I now had to pause the video for to find out a piece of information, so wait there. Right, so I'm a moron. It turns out I didn't need to pause the video and I've spoiled the surprise, because what it says there is, it says, the first edition of the wiring regulations was published by the Society of Telegraph Engineers. Why would they do it? Why wouldn't it be the electricians? Because electricians have been around for years, but all they've been doing is telegraph and telephone. I don't think telephone at this point, I think it's just telegraph. Morse code, beep, 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 and all that. And you can see there, look, they produced it because the first transatlantic telephone cable from Europe to America was laid in the 1850s, 30 years before we had street light, which I find amazing. I find it amazing that the telegraph had travelled the entire world pretty much before we'd even got electric street lighting going, which is bonkaroos. So that's why they dealt with it, because they'd already been dealing with cables and wires to quite a high level enough to go across the Atlantic before then. It contained just... My dog's barking, but I'll carry on. The first one contained 4 pages, and that is it. And you can get copies of it. I ain't got a copy of it. They float around, but I've never been able to find one. Not that I've looked that hard, but they are interesting to read. And it was called The Rules and Regulations for the Prevention of Fire Risks Arising from Electric Lighting. Now, that's an interesting concept, because the rules and regulations for the prevention of fire risks arising from electric lighting leads me to believe that there was fires being caused by electric lighting. Why else would there be some rules and regulations to combat that? There's still electrical fires now. That's the regulations were originally brought out in the 1881 to combat fires from electricity. And unfortunately, still now, there is fires being caused by electricity, such as the Grenfell Tower, that kind of thing, which is really sad that in that far we've not got around with that. But I don't think the regs are to blame for that. I think the quality of installation is to blame for that. But hey ho. What I would say is, and this is my personal opinion now, is the rules and regulations for the prevention of fires arising from electric lighting was probably brought out not because poor people's houses were burning down, but because rich people's houses were burning down. And you can imagine, like nowadays, if Grenfell had been a rich property, it would have been sorted out by now. They wouldn't be in courts blaming each other. But I digress into my own opinion here. But we've been trying to stop electric fires causing problems since 1881. And that regs came out then to do that. The purpose of those regulations was to ensure that workmanship was of the highest order, or standard as we'd call it now, that the materials used were of suitable quality for the job, and that the installation was safe. Yeah? Nothing's changed in 18th editions. That's all the regs are there to do now. They are there to do the same thing as they always did, to ensure workmanship, materials that are quality, and the installation is safe. Nothing's changed, get used to it. That's all the regulations do every time they come out. But they incorporate new technologies and advancements in electrical engineering. The 16th edition, as I mentioned, the book I had, and I think I mentioned it previously in one of the videos, was a very, very long edition, because it's my edition. When I started as an electrician, the 16th edition was in. And I watched the 16th edition Amendment 2, I think, if we're on the floor down there, start to incorporate RCDs. And in my generation of being an electrician, I've watched RCDs wean themselves from being a very expensive niche product into the regulations and now become a standard thing applied to every circuit, even in a different type, gone from AC to type A. So I've watched that. That's my tale of being an electrical engineer, my regulations tale. Yours, if you're learning it now, will probably be AFDDs, which at the minute are these exotic, expensive things that are designed to prevent fires. And they're very expensive. £100 a module, I think you're looking at roughly at the minute. But I suspect that you guys watching, or me, hopefully, if I live long enough, hopefully I'll live long enough to watch AFDDs become the £15 things that RCDs are now. And eventually, in about, I don't know, it took 20 years for RCDs to come in for me. I expect in 20 years' time, so let's say, 10 years' time, 2030, I suspect, hopefully, we'll be seeing a massive reduction in the amount of fires caused by electrical engineering because AFDDs will be a common thing, and that's only a good thing. And we've got to remember that that's what we are pushing with the regs. It took us over 100 years to get something that's designed to detect and stop fires, but we've been pushing through it, and all the regulation been building up to it. Obviously, we didn't worry about fires first. We worried more about RCDs and protecting people, which was nice. But again, nothing's changed. We're still out to do that, protect fires and people. So, some bits and bobs about the BS7671, I call them top tips, yeah? It is a floor, not a ceiling, yeah? Don't call it the minimum standard because that's what pricks say, yeah? It just makes it sound like it's gash. It's not. It's quite a high standard. So, although it is a minimum, yeah, it's not a minimum because the minimum is much worse. The minimum you can actually do is the minimum regulatory standard. I call it a floor, not a ceiling, because I just find people that say the regs is the minimum standard to be tits, to be honest. If you want to know people, get off my fucking course, asshole. So it's a floor, not a ceiling, and it's a pathway, an entrance to hundreds of other BS documents. So you might be working to BS 7671 to do the installation of an electrical job in a building, but you'll be incorporating other British standards like British standards for emergency lighting, British standards for fire alarms, British standards for switchgear, British standards for fucking helipads, I don't know. There's loads of them, and they'll need to be read in conjunction or guide them with this document to produce a usable design. It is definitely not a how-to document or DIY book. There are very, very few pictures in the regulations that will assist you in creating a wiring diagram for a lighting, for example. It's just not in there. It doesn't cover anything like that. You can't pick it up and open it up and read it like I first thought I did when I was 16 and start trying to find about how to wire electrical. It's just not in there. It's a series of rules. It's written in legalese. It is not for every electrical situation. I invite you now to stop the video. Well, not stop it. Keep watching, motherfucker. But pause it and go to regulation 110.1.1. This will be your first insight to using those numbers to find a regulation. So pause now and find 110.1.1. I'm assuming you're back and you found that. Congratulations. You have successfully used the regulation number 110.1.1 to find that regulation. You'll find that that has detailed what regulations and what things the regs are applicable to, which I'm not going to go into because you can read it in your own fucking book. What I will tell you now is, don't be a dick and use page numbers. There's going to be an entire video on how to understand regulation numbers coming up, so always use reg numbers. Never use page numbers because page numbers in additions change. Reg numbers about the same thing tend to stay the same. It's like saying, oh, my mate lives in the third house down the street, and using that method to get to his house. If someone builds two houses in front of him, his house won't be the third one down the street, but the number for it will always be the same. Think of it like that. So always use reg numbers when speaking to other people using regulations or dealing with stuff in the regs, because page numbers won't work. If you want to write down your favourite regulations on a bit of paper, use the reg numbers, not the page numbers, because the next book, the page numbers will be different. I can teach you that or show you that if I was here, by getting a modern regs book, the brown one, getting the last edition and comparing some reg numbers against page numbers and seeing they're all wrong. So that's a very important tip. Part 2. One of my favourite parts will aid you with all the latest technobabble. It's the dictionary, basically. It's the electrical dictionary. It's where you go to find out what a word means or what a word is. So like, I don't know, buzz bar trunking, for example, is in there. So I invite you now to pause the video, go to part 2, and then find some electrical babble in there. It's always worth reading that section just once, because then when you're in an exam and you get a word you're like, can't remember what that word is, but I know it's in part 2. So please pause the video now, jump through part 2, just have a read of it, and come back to it when you've had a look at that. And finally, as I've already adhered to, anyone can pass this exam. They are not necessarily a competent person. And I'm going to tell a little story about this now, yeah? I've said, like, firms will send people on this course because they want to just get them on a course and get them qualified or competent to be an electrician. That is not the case. I would regularly stand up in lessons. I pause there to drink a bit of my brew. So I'd regularly stand there in lessons and say this little tale, yeah? And I used to work at Nottingham University as an electrician. And I'd say, if I took someone out of this classroom to the university, and we went to the library, and we stood in the short loans queue, which is where people go to get books they require quickly and return quickly to get quotes and stuff out of, and we got the first person in the queue, in the short loans queue, out of the queue, dragged them back to the classroom, sat them down with a regs book and an exam, they would pass the exam. I fucking guarantee it. Because they are students and they are wise and adept and knowledgeable in referencing books against questions. And they will just literally look through the book, work out how it's structured, which is common for books. Then they get the questions and they'd read the question, separate the wheat from the chaff in the question, go in the regs book, and they'd pass the exam. And I said that for years of teaching. Then one day, a lady came on a course from a rail company who was a mechanical engineer. It's not her fault. And she proved my point. She was a degree level educated student. She came in. I said that ditty. She said she thought it was right. And then next day, she passed with 100% with not a lot of effort on her part because she understood how to use and reference the book. That's why my course is like this. Because I don't want you to know the regs. I want you to be able to reference them. So you're always current and competent. Always current being the fact that if the new regs comes out, you'll reference the new regs and get the right answer for that edition. Not that you're holding on some old memory of, I don't know, something from an edition previously. Like, I see a lot of 60th edition sparks thinking you just have to bond everything up in a bathroom together, which is a thing called cage bonding, which went out in the 16th edition. So, they're my top tips. So, what's it all about? This never changes, and I've just checked the regs book to see if this has changed this one. Regulation 131.1. So I invite you to pause the video, find that page, and then come back. Yep, by now you pause that and come back. It says, the requirements of this chapter are intended to provide for the safety of persons, livestock and property against the dangers and damage which may arise with the reasonable use of electrical installations. The requirement to protect livestock is only intended in locations intended for them, which means you don't have to apply protection measures for livestock in your living room of your house. That quote I've just read out, is reminiscent of this. Rules and regulations for the prevention of fire risks arising from electric lighting. It's just the same, that's what it's turned into, is the requirements of this chapter are intended to provide the safety of persons, livestock and property against the dangers and damage which may arise in the reasonable use of electrical installations. No, it says reasonable because no one covers you if you're being a dickhead. And those things that it covers now are shock currents, direct and indirect, excessive temperatures causing fire, ignition causing fire, undervoltage and overvoltages and electromagnetics, mechanical movement of electrical control equipment, there's a typo there, power interruptions and return, for example, I don't know, you're at school, using the pillar drill, the power goes off, the drill stops. When the power comes back on and you're trying to work out what's wrong with it, it doesn't rip your arm off because we stop that happening. So we're looking at power interruption and return issues and arcing and burning. And they are all listed under Regulation 131.1. It's well worth familiarising yourself with Part 1 because it lays down all the ground rules for the regulations. But again, it's not something I'm going to go over in this course, it's something that you have to read. Do you have to read the regs book? I would suggest, like I would suggest with all documentation, like I tell people about the electricity at work regulations, is that every book should be read once because you'll get a feel for it and how it's laid out. Don't do it in a wanna, don't sit there hammering it. Just put it on your bedside table like I do with the new regs when it comes out. Read it once over a few weeks. That's all you got to do. Although it is not a statutory document, yeah, BS 7671 is not law. It is not law. but it sets the standard for how electrical installations should be completed in the UK and enables compliance with the law. You will not go to court for failure to adhere to BS 7671. You will get taken to court for failure to adhere to the electricity at work regulations, which sort of sets the regs up to be the go-to document, yeah? The electricity at work regulations are a statutory document, they are law, and they will be whipped onto you. That will be whipped onto you to make compliance with BS 7671 pretty much essential, unless you're in very, very specific environments where you can get away with it. And the installer and the designers can be held personally responsible at a later date for failure to comply. So be aware, this isn't a course on the electricity work regulations, but I'm going to do a video on that. The electricity work regulations is, again, a document that should be read at least once. I'm not going to do what I normally do when I'm teaching because I'm going to do a separate video for it. But yeah, please download a copy of the electricity work regulations and read it at least once. And then watch the video I'm going to produce on it, because that is law. BS 7671 is not law. They love asking that as a question. It is not a statutory instrument. It is not a statutory document. It is not law. It is a British standard. But you'd be hard pushed to, if you went and bought a child seat, you won't find one that's legal. You'd find one that's compliant with the British standard, which makes them pretty much just as good as each other, if you know what I mean. So yeah, it is not a statutory document. That is important to remember. This covers changes in the regs, which I'm going to now drop into a separate video, because this one's getting a bit long, and it's just going to be history of how we got to the regulation where we are now. So the next video on the line will be the continuation of this one, and we'll see how we go from there, because I appreciate, I've said, I'm trying to make these small bite-sized chunks so that you don't get fucking bored, because you're probably watching these because you don't want to go and sit a course. So thanks for watching this far, and I'll see you in a bit.